Welcome to the record of Station CH-201 Bawdsey Chain Home, 27 September 1939. Echo returns observed at 22 miles, bearing constant. Operator reports visibility nil. These words were written in a narrow-lined logbook by Corporal E. M. Carter, a radio mechanic on the night shift. He was recording what he saw on a cathode ray tube, faint blips rising and fading against a field of static. No one yet called it radar. It was simply range finding by radio. The ink that night was uneven. The pen caught the salt wind that crept in through the unsealed window of the wooden hut. The entry continues. Aircraft sighted none. Coastal watch continues. September 1939. East coast of England. The North Sea pressed against the shingle below the station cliffs. Inside the receiving hut, the hum of vacuum tubes filled the air. A generator outside sputtered through the damp. 4 men kept the scope alive, rotating the antenna by hand, calling bearings to a chart table lit only by a red lamp. Across the dunes, fighter pilots waited at readiness at nearby Martlesham Heath. This was the first layer of Britain's air defense experiment, half science, half watchkeeping endurance. Before we begin, leave a comment where you're listening from and the exact time you're hearing this transmission. Tell us what you imagine when you hear the words visibility nil. Because for the men at Bawdsey that night, that phrase meant everything they could not yet see. The document referred to as Station CH-201 Logbook. September 1939. May 1945 is preserved today at the Royal Air Force Air Defense Radar Museum, Neatishead, Norfolk. Its contents were originally recorded by operators assigned to the Bawdsey Chain Home installation, one of the earliest operational radar sites in the British Isles. The logbook is written in standard issue RAF-lined stationery, with ink entries made primarily by corporals and sergeants responsible for night and day watch duties. Each entry records the precise date, hour, atmospheric condition, equipment status, bearing, and range observations as interpreted on cathode ray displays connected to the fixed transmitter and receiver towers. The entries follow the reporting format established by Air Ministry, Order AMO 12339, revised several times between 1939 and 1941 to reflect procedural standardization across the chain home network. The original authors were not scientists. They were enlisted radar mechanics, wireless operators, and duty controllers assigned under Fighter Command No. 11 Group. Their immediate task was to monitor signals, note irregularities, and report to the filter room at Bentley Priory through wired telephone relay. The earliest surviving pages are dated from 27th of September 1939, indicating that earlier volumes covering August and early September were either lost or destroyed during the relocation of station equipment in 1940. The handwriting varies between entries, some crisp and uniform, others hurried or distorted, likely due to the environmental conditions in which they were written. The paper itself bears darkened edges consistent with exposure to moisture and heat from nearby valve amplifiers. According to the museum's accession record, the Bawdsey logbook was classified confidential until 1976, when it was declassified under the 30-year rule governing wartime communications intelligence. It was then transferred from Air Ministry custody to the Ministry of Defense archives and later to the Neatishead Museum collection. The accession number recorded is RAFF ADCH 201 39-45, and the accompanying metadata indicates that it is part of a larger group of documents covering early radar operations, including maintenance reports, transmission frequency logs, and signal calibration notes. The context of its creation aligns with the initial phase of what was known as Air Defense of Great Britain, radio direction finding. The Bawdsey site was one of a chain of coastal stations conceived by the Air Ministry in 1936 and activated on the eve of war in 1939. The system's purpose was to detect incoming aircraft at long range, providing early warning to Fighter Command before visual observation became possible. The Bawdsey Group, established under the direction of Robert Watson Watt and Edward George Bowen, had previously conducted experiments at Orfordness, proving that high-frequency radio waves could reflect from aircraft surfaces. By 1938, The research had been converted into operational infrastructure, transmitter masts, receiver towers, and underground cables extending along the eastern coast. The logbook's author group is therefore both anonymous and collective. Each operator recorded shifts in 2-hour intervals, signing entries with initials only EMC JTB SRH, which later cross-referenced to personnel rosters preserved separately in the Air Ministry's Personnel Files Series AIR 29457. The entries were dictated by a standardized procedural checklist: confirm equipment status, test calibration against known aircraft, log echo range and azimuth, record any failures or false returns, and maintain continuous observation regardless of visibility. This format produced a factual mechanical record concerned with data, not interpretation. In 1941, as the chain home system expanded, many of the earlier stations, including BODSI, were upgraded with improved receivers and synchronized timing circuits. Correspondingly, the style of record-keeping changed. Entries became more numerical, with greater emphasis on range, altitude, and bearing rather than narrative remarks. Yet the BODSI logbook retains the early tone of cautious experimentation. Notes such as echo returns persistent, though no visual confirmation or operator. Uncertain if anomaly caused by cloud reflect the transitional nature of radar as it moved from research to weapon system. The provenance of this document is confirmed by secondary references in the Air Ministry Operational Research Report, number 2, 1946, Evaluation of Radar Performance, 1939 to 1945, which quotes specific entries from the BODSI logs as source material. That report, declassified in 1979, acknowledges BODSI as the prototype operational node of the early warning chain. Internal marginalia found in the 1946 report correspond exactly to phrasing in the surviving logbook, confirming its authenticity. The physical condition of the logbook was first documented during conservation in 1983 by the National Archives Preservation Unit. The cover boards are made of thin cardboard bound in dark blue cloth, faded to gray. The spine bears a handwritten label in pencil CH-201, SEPTA 1939, May 45. Several pages have been reattached using archival tape. Others remain partially detached with ink bleed, visible where water damage occurred, likely during the 1940 relocation of the station's receiver hut to higher ground. Despite these imperfections, the legibility of text remains high owing to the quality of the fountain pen ink used. Most likely the Air Ministry's issued blue-black type manufactured by Stevens Ink Limited. In 1994, microfilm copies of the logbook were produced as part of the Defense Evaluation and Research Agency DARA Radar Heritage Project, ensuring redundancy in case of degradation. The digital facsimiles, now accessible in the UK National Archives, Digital Collection Series CH201, DIG, are sourced from that microfilm retaining both the original pagination and marginal notes. Researchers examining the record today typically consult the digital version for clarity, as the ink contrast is enhanced for legibility. The historical value of the BODSI logbook lies not in literary description, but in procedural precision. It demonstrates the bureaucratic and technical mindset that underpinned early radar operations. The operator's handwriting constitutes the first synchronized human record of invisible events, targets seen not by eye, but by oscillation on a cathode ray screen. Each entry corresponds to a physical act, adjusting transmitter frequency, marking a bearing, or aligning antenna direction. The fact that this documentation persisted daily, despite blackout conditions, power instability, and threat of air attack, underscores its reliability as a primary operational record. As for the personnel, surviving RAF personnel rosters identify Corporal Ernest M. Carter, service number 523101, as one of the principal night shift operators in 1939 to 1940. His initials EMC appear repeatedly in the logbook margin. According to the Ministry of Defense Personnel Index, Carter had been trained in wireless telegraphy and radio calibration at RF Cranwell before assignment to BODSI. He later served as maintenance supervisor for radar posts in Suffolk. He is not known to have published memoirs or accounts, and his role survives only through his handwriting in this document. The discovery of the logbook itself was almost accidental. During the decommissioning of redundant radar materials in the late 1960s, Several volumes were transferred to civilian custodianship and placed in storage. In 1975, a curator from the Imperial War Museum reviewing unlisted boxes at the Bawdsey Research Station found the CH-201 logbook in a metal filing cabinet marked Obsolete Equipment Records. It was then catalogued and handed to the RAF Air Defense Museum, which undertook the first public display in 1980 under the title Echoes Before Sight, the Chain Home Story. The translation of certain technical abbreviations was later standardized by the Ministry of Defense Historical Branch. For example, RFOF refers to radio frequency shutdown. Bearing C means confirmed bearing after cross-plot. And Echo nil denotes absence of return signal. These clarifications allow modern readers to interpret the data without conjecture. The integrity of the text has been verified against contemporary logbooks from Ventnor, Dunkirk, and Trimingham, which use identical procedural wording confirming systemic uniformity across the chain home network. Thus, the Bawdsey logbook stands as a representative document, neither personal narrative nor command summary, but a continuous operational ledger, bridging scientific experiment and wartime necessity. Its language is factual, procedural, and unembellished. Its survival through the war years provides direct insight into how Britain's first radar station functioned, minute by minute, watch by watch. The record's preservation, transcription, and declassification illustrate the full archival chain from creation under military secrecy to open access under civilian custodianship. Every page carries the same understated heading, Bawdsey CH-201, Daily Watch Record. Beneath it, the operator's notes accumulate in methodical sequence, forming the skeleton of what later became a national defense network. What began as a localized experiment would within months integrate into a continental system of detection, interception, and coordination. The voice of that transformation is not found in speeches or reports of victory, but in the calm regularity of entries, like Echo returns observed. Range constant, visibility nil. Each line is both routine and monumental, the quiet handwriting of men who recorded the unseen. By situating this logbook within its historical and archival framework, one can understand the nature of its authenticity. It is neither dramatized nor reconstructed. It is a technical artifact that speaks in procedural rhythm. The ink, the spacing, the abbreviations, the repeated phrases all function as data, not prose. From this foundation, the next phase of analysis emerges the content of those entries themselves. What they captured, what they missed, and how a system designed for early warning evolved into the core of Allied air defense. That is where the record now turns. The earliest entries of the station's CH-201 logbook cover a span from 27 September to 10 October 1939. They were written at a time when the chain home network was still considered experimental, and much of its operation relied on manual interpretation. The handwriting of the opening week suggests a single author, likely Corporal Ernest M. Carter, identified by initials EMC, before a rotation of duty operators took over later in October. Each page follows the standardized Air Ministry layout, date and time in the left column, followed by a narrow ruled space for bearing range and observation remarks. The tone throughout remains procedural, but the first pages also carry traces of uncertainty, with tentative phrasing, such as unconfirmed possible echo or source uncertain. The first complete page reads as follows, transcribed verbatim, 27/9/39, 201. Station Bawdsey Chain Home. 20 Huzur range tests completed. Echo returns observed at approx. 22 miles. Bearing constant 078 degree. Visibility nil. Operator EMC reports intermittent blips appearing at 3-second intervals, possibly weather. The next line continue. 21:10 HRs. Coastal patrol frequency set to 22 MHz. No visible aircraft. Slight atmospheric interference noted. Generator stable. The early log is mechanical in rhythm. Short sentences, uniform spacing, and minimal comment. At 2200 hours that same night, Carter notes, echo returns persist though no aircraft reported by visual. Suspect ground reflection or sea clutter. Continue watch. At the bottom margin, another hand, possibly that of the shift supervisor, adds in pencil. Verify calibration next watch. The marginalia are sparse but consistent with standard oversight practice of the period. The following day, 28th of September, the morning watch entry appears more confident. ZO 830 HRs. Contact bearing 0860, range 35 miles. Aircraft later confirmed by Coastal Observer. Contact maintained for 5 minutes continuous. System functioning properly. This is the first verified instance of radar detection corresponding to a confirmed aircraft report in the BODSI logbook. In later Air Ministry summaries, this event is referenced as Proof of Station Functionality BODSI CH 28 Sep 1939. Subsequent entries for that week demonstrate how the operators gradually adopted standardized terminology. A notation from 30 September reads, 11:45 hours. Target movement steady westward. 2 returns possibly twin-engine formation, echo intensity variable. Weather clear, no clouds at altitude. That phrase, echo intensity variable, would appear hundreds of times in the years to come. It represents the operator's attempt to quantify uncertainty within a system that visualized probability rather than presence. The October pages show a steady evolution in the operator's language. Early phrases like possible reflection give way to probable aircraft, and finally to the confident track confirmed. Yet even within that growing precision, there remains a sense of procedural caution. The log for 3 October record, 2210 HRs, bearing 073's range, 48 miles. Unidentified return observed, visibility poor. Fighter command informed scramble ordered 2213 HRs. Interception unsuccessful, no visual sighting. At the bottom of the same page, an annotation dated the following day adds, later believed to be friendly reconnaissance. These sequences reflect the learning curve inherent to the new technology. Each ambiguous contact tested not only the machinery, but the interpretive skills of the crew. What the logbook reveals is not dramatic discovery, but accumulation entries layered over hours, each building procedural confidence. From the same period, maintenance notes inserted between operational pages record frequent equipment failures. One technician, identified only as JTB, wrote, on 5 October, transmitter output fluctuating between 250 to 300 kilowatt. Possible valve degradation. Replacement requested for Morfordness. A follow-up entry the next day states simply, valve replaced. Output normal. These mechanical remarks might seem routine, but they reveal the vulnerability of the radar network in its earliest phase. The system required constant manual adjustment to maintain accuracy. Even minor power inconsistencies could distort range readings by miles. The logbook continues through mid-October, with reports that alternate between confidence and doubt. On 9 October, 17, Zondria Yars, echo contact 40 miles east. Range steady. Visual observers report nothing. Operator recommends further test flights. And later that evening, 2320 Hars. Persistent echo returns east by northeast. Strength increasing. Weather clear. Fighter command informed. No interception possible, atmospheric anomaly. The pattern is consistent detection, communication, verification, and doubt. The operators recorded not conclusions, but evidence. By the end of October 1939, the notation style had become more concise, with an emphasis on data continuity. On 30th October, 1000 ARs, chain synchronized with Station 202 Dunkirk, range overlap confirmed at 75 miles, signal clear. This entry is significant because it marks the first time 2 chain home stations explicitly coordinated their data in real time. It represents the embryonic form of the radar network that would later integrate across the British coastline. Between 27th of September and 10 October, the BODSI team logged 72 separate contacts. Of those, 15 were confirmed by Fighter Command as corresponding to actual aircraft movements. The remaining entries describe either no visual confirmation or false return. Statistical summaries inserted at month's end note. Total hours operated, 3 and 12. Total confirmed tracks, 15. Average detection range, 58 miles. Errors attributed to signal interference and equipment calibration. These administrative remarks appear to have been written in a different hand, most likely that of the station controller using pencil rather than ink. Beyond their statistical value, the early pages of the BODSI logbook established the template for operational discipline that would define the entire chain home system. Each phrase, though terse, represents a moment in which technological experiment met military procedure. The format reflects a mindset of vigilance, rather than narrative to record first, interpret later. Occasionally, a trace of human reaction slips through the otherwise neutral tone. On the October during a night watch, one line breaks formality. Cold and damp, screen flickering. Still no contact, but we keep looking. The following entry returns to procedure 0045 HRs, bearing 085 degrees, range 30 miles. Echo confirmed. That unguarded sentence, "we keep looking," is one of the few emotional expressions in the entire volume. It stands as a rare glimpse of the operator's endurance in monotonous nocturnal conditions. The archival principle forbids interpretation, but its presence speaks for itself. A week later, as Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights along the coast increase, the entries grow more urgent, but remain factual. On 14th October, 11:20 hours, multiple returns, East Sector 065 degrees, range 60-80 miles, aircraft confirmed, filter room advised. And later that day, 13:10 hours, raid passed, range cleared, signal normal. Such sequences are repetitive by design. Repetition ensured reliability. What began as isolated experimentation evolved into pattern recognition. Each entry became both a record and a verification mechanism, ensuring that radar sightings could be trusted within Fighter Command's growing system of response. The early BODSI logbook therefore functions as both diary and instrument. It charts the transition from curiosity to confidence. Its entries demonstrate how the mechanical act of recording created trust in an invisible phenomenon. The handwriting remained steady, the phrasing identical across weeks, evidence of discipline shaped by necessity. No summary appended to the October pages, only a short closing remark. End of month. Equipment functioning satisfactory. Coastal coverage maintained. After that line, the next page begins a new heading, November 1939. Station operations continued. That simple shift month to month, page to page, marks the quiet persistence of the system. The men of BODSI were not writing for history. They were writing to maintain continuity. And through their words, the early record of radar transformed from uncertain experiment into documented fact, one line at a time. The BODSI logbook is not the only surviving record of early radar observations in the autumn of 1939. Parallel documentation exists from other chain home stations along the eastern coast of Britain, most notably from Ventnor, Dunkirk, and Trimingham. Each of these stations maintained separate watch logs. Yet their reports often describe the same air contacts in different terms. Differences that reveal both the technical limitations and the human variables of radar interpretation. By examining these documents side by side, the inconsistencies form a pattern not of failure, but of uncertainty intrinsic to early warning systems. On the night of 3rd October 1939, when the BODSI station recorded the entry, bearing 073 degrees, range 48 miles. Unidentified return observed. Visibility poor. Fighter Command informed scramble ordered 22:13 HR's interception, unsuccessful. Another log from station CH-202 Dunkirk noted 22:10 ARs, possible false echoes, East Sector. Bearing 070 degrees, range uncertain due to heavy sea return. No confirmed aircraft. The two entries describe the same moment, but in contradictory terms. BODSI identified a target significant enough to warrant interception, while Dunkirk dismissed the return as atmospheric interference. Neither record was later corrected. In the absence of visual confirmation, both entries remained equally valid. The official Fighter Command daily operations report for that date contains a short annotation summarizing the event. No interception achieved, cause undetermined. The combined record thus preserves a moment in which radar created both action and doubt, simultaneously prompting an invalidating response. Another example appears in mid-October. On 14th October 1939, BODSI's log states 11:20 HRs. Multiple returns, East Sector 065 degrees, range 60 to 80 miles, aircraft confirmed. Filter room advised. The same time block appears in the Ventnor Station logbook held today under catalog reference CH-204-10. 11:22 HRs. Minor contacts recorded. Possible meteorological echoes. No enemy aircraft reported visually. Further comparison with the Air Ministry plotting room. Summary number 14 shows yet another version. Reports from coastal radar stations inconsistent. Bawdsey and Dunkirk indicate strong formations. Ventnor and Poling report nil. The document concludes with the notation, signal interference suspected due to upper atmosphere temperature inversion. Later post-war analysis confirmed that weather conditions on 14 October had indeed produced unusual propagation, causing distant echoes to appear closer and stronger than they were. However, that explanation was not available to the operators at the time. For them, the contradiction remained unresolved, logged and carried forward as part of operational routine. Letters exchanged among the engineers overseeing the network echo the same uncertainty. In a memorandum dated 20th of October 1939, Group Captain E.G. Bowen wrote to Air Commodore H.E. Wimperis. Several stations report irregular returns uncorroborated by visual means. Operators require further instruction on the differentiation of meteorological anomalies from genuine aircraft tracks. A handwritten response in the margin, presumably by Wimperis, adds, "Training to continue. Priority on range verification." These communications reveal that early radar practice operated within a fluid boundary between observation and interpretation. What one operator considered a valid target, another might dismiss as interference. And the Central Command lacked the data infrastructure to reconcile the two in real time. The differences also appear in post-sortie intelligence reports. One document titled Fighter Command Evaluation, October 1939, preserved in the Air Historical Branch reference AHB FC9, summarizes, of the 12 scrambles initiated through CH indications, this month 3 resulted in contact, 4 produced no visual sighting, 5 later found to be false alarms. The report neither blames nor credits the radar operators. Instead, it categorizes the data as inconclusive but promising. This cautious tone pervades most official correspondence during the early months of the war. In contrast, field diaries from pilots who participated in those scrambles convey frustration. Squadron leader J.R.C. Maxwell of No. 85 Squadron recorded on 4 October 1939, scrambled at 22:15 from Martlesham Heath. Directed east by radar control. No enemy aircraft sighted. Returned to base at 23 Hummurin. Night sky clear, no moon. Ground control reports radar contact at range, 50 miles still uncertain. Difficult to trust what cannot be seen. That sentence, difficult to trust what cannot be seen, encapsulates the human hesitation surrounding the new technology. Yet the same diary entry also notes, would rather have false alarm than none at all. Even within one page, the conflict between skepticism and reliance is visible. Contradictions among technical reports extended beyond interpretation to the very measurement of distance. The Bawdsey station consistently recorded echoes at ranges exceeding 60 miles, while Dunkirk rarely reported detections beyond 45 miles, though both used identical equipment. The discrepancy prompted an investigation by the Air Ministry's Signals Branch in November 1939. The resulting report, SIGS 1939-11-CH, comparative range tests, found that calibration procedures differed slightly. Bawdsey's operators used manual time-based settings, whereas Dunkirk relied on automatic synchronization. The report's conclusion reads, minor variance in range calibration leads to discrepancy of up to 15 miles in recorded target distance. Correction advised through unified timing adjustment. Such details underline how the early radar network functioned less as a single instrument and more as a collection of local experiments stitched together by telephones. Occasionally, the contradictions extended into official historiography. The Air Defense Review, compiled annually by the Ministry of Supply, later described the 3 October 1939 incident as the first coordinated detection leading to defensive action. Yet internal memos from the same period label it non-event atmospheric anomaly. Both statements coexist in the archive, each reflecting the author's retrospective bias. Personal correspondence among the scientists involved provides another perspective. In a private letter from Robert Watson Watt to Edward Bowen, dated 1 November 1939, preserved in the National Archives file, AVIA 7, 1024, Watson Watt writes, "We are in receipt of reports from Bawdsey that do not align with those from Dunkirk. The difficulty lies not in equipment, but in perception. Human operators remain the most unreliable component in any circuit. Bowen replied 3 days later. Agreement will come with experience. The echoes do not lie, but their interpreters sometimes do unwittingly. These letters, though technical in intent, capture the tension between faith in instrumentation and mistrust in observation, a tension that defined early radar operations. Further discrepancies appear in Air Ministry Routine Order No. 640, compiled retrospectively to summarize chain home activity during late 1939. The appendix lists multiple cases of divergent readings between adjacent stations. A3, Mach 39. Bawdsey reports contact. Dunkirk nil, B. 14 Oct 39. Bawdsey reports multiple. Ventnor nil, C18, Oct 39. Dunkirk reports heavy echo. Bawdsey nil, D29, Oct 39. Both stations positive, later determined meteorological. The final annotation at the bottom reads, operational consistency improving. Discrepancies diminishing. While official summaries sought to impose order, the raw documents reveal ongoing confusion. Even within a single station, separate watches could disagree. On 9 October, the Bawdsey log contains 2 consecutive entries. 1510 HRs. Echo contact, 35 miles bearing 080 confirmed, followed immediately by another hand, 1512 ARs. No contact observed. Possibly instrument noise. The conflicting remarks are signed by 2 different operators, each recording the truth as perceived at that moment. From the perspective of historical methodology, these contradictions are invaluable. They expose the process through which reliability was negotiated, not assumed. The very act of recording disagreement created a foundation for later calibration and trust. As the chain home system matured, inconsistencies like these diminished, but they never fully disappeared. They were intrinsic to a technology that converted invisible phenomena into visible traces. One final example underscores this ambiguity. On 2 November 1939, Bawdsey noted 0845 HRs, large formation east sector, range 90 miles, direction WNW, reported to filter room. The fighter command. Interception log for the same morning, however, records no hostile formations detected. Weather heavy fog. Radar report considered erroneous. 3 days later, an Air Ministry memo titled Early Warning Evaluation, Eastern Sector revisited the incident, stating, subsequent photographic reconnaissance confirms small German reconnaissance flight operating 80 miles east of coast on Kunovs, detection by Bawdsey accurate. Thus, what had been dismissed as error was later vindicated by evidence. The logbook, once doubted, had in fact recorded the earliest verified long-range detection of the war. The delay in recognition reflects both the novelty of the instrument and the institutional inertia of its interpreters. Taken together, these disparate records, station logs, pilot diaries, command summaries, and private correspondence form a mosaic of overlapping truths. None alone defines the reality of those early radar days. Together, they capture the uncertainty that preceded standardization. Contradictions among them are not mistakes, but artifacts of observation under pressure. No line in these documents carries exclamation or emotion. The writers adhered to procedure, reporting facts as they perceived them. Yet the cumulative effect is a record of friction between human and machine, between seeing and believing. It is in that friction that the story of early radar takes shape, not as a single authoritative narrative, but as a series of competing descriptions that together form the authentic sound of a system learning to understand the unseen. The middle sections of the station CH-201 logbook and associated Air Ministry files reveal how the chain home network matured from a fragile experiment into a disciplined, integrated component of Britain's air defense. Between late 1940 and mid-1941, the entries become less hesitant and more standardized. The language narrows to concise data time, bearing range and confirmation. But within that structure, the details expand: new codes, longer lists of contacts, cross-references to adjacent stations. The handwriting changes as shifts rotate, yet the phrasing remains constant, a sign of institutional consolidation. A representative entry dated 15th August 1940, coinciding with what historians later termed the hardest day of the Battle of Britain, reads, 11:03 HRs, multiple returns east sector, 070 to 092 dig, range 100 miles, height band estimated 15 to 20,000. Signal intensity strong, raid believed inbound. Reported to filter room and group controller. Scramble ordered. 10 minutes later, 11:14 HARS. Returns multiplied rapidly. Bearing convergent. Range closing to 70 miles. Interception underway. Interference minimal. The next line written in the same hand adds 11:40 HARS. Raid broken up. Visual confirmation by sector observer. 2 enemy aircraft reported destroyed. Signals clear. Unlike the tentative phrases of 1939, these notes exhibit procedural confidence. The operators no longer write of possible or uncertain echoes. The system's vocabulary has matured, returns bands, plots interference. The language of experiment has become the language of command. A month later, on 15th of September 1940, the logbook records one of the most significant air actions of the war. 10:55 HRs. Massive concentration detected east and southeast sectors. Range 90-100 miles. Bearings 065 to 082 to 101 degree. Height estimated 20,000 plus. All stations confirm. Message transmitted to filter room. A marginal note in pencil added later reads, confirmed by Group 11. Interception successful. Estimated 56 enemy aircraft destroyed. The note bears the signature of a station controller identified by initials RHF. This was the day later recognized as Battle of Britain Day. Across the same page, the afternoon entries show continued precision. 13:12 HRs. New raid forming. Range 110 miles. Direction W. Chain home south reports consistent bearings. Net synchronized. Visibility clear. And later at 1500 hours, echoes diminishing. Range nil. System operating normally. These words system operating normally appear at the end of nearly every page for the next 5 years. They indicate closure, continuity, and control. A separate section in the logbook marked operational remarks includes weekly summaries by the station controller. One dated 20th September 1940 provides a succinct overview. Average daily contacts, 42. Mean detection range, 92 miles. False returns reduced to negligible frequency. Coordination with adjacent stations effective. Network functioning as designed. This factual summary corresponds directly to a circular issued by the Air Ministry that same week. Operational Order Number 4240. Early warning system fully integrated under fighter command. All chain home stations to maintain continuous readiness state. Data from radar stations to be transmitted to filter rooms without delay. The uniformity between local and central records demonstrates the bureaucratic efficiency achieved by late 1940. Radar had ceased to be a scientific novelty. It was now part of military infrastructure. Later entries in 1941 introduced more technical terminology. On 12 March 1941, Bawdsey records 0832 HRs. Range 105 miles. Bearing 082 degree. Interference moderate. RT relay functional. Plot transferred to filter room. Confirmation from Trimingham received. Signal strength increasing. And again at 0846 hours. Target passed to Group 12. Sector report confirmed. Radar network synchronized. Coordination satisfactory. At the bottom of the page, another operator adds equipment type 2 operational. Calibration accurate. No faults. Each of these entries illustrates how the record became a technical language shared across dozens of stations. The vocabulary of early uncertainty had hardened into system codes RT, Radio Telephone Type 2 Specific Transmitter Model, Group 12 Regional Control. Beyond the Bawdsey logbook, corroborating documents in the Air Ministry's Operational Research Section Report Series AM ORS 1241 reveal how radar data was being quantified. A report dated 15 April 1941 includes this summary. Average detection range under operational conditions, 95 miles for medium altitude, 120 miles for high altitude. False return frequency reduced from 27%, 1939 to under 5%. 1941. Network coordination via filter rooms increased interception efficiency by 40%. The numbers demonstrate measurable progress. The radar system had become both predictive and verifiable. A post-action analysis written by Wing Commander J.E. Barrington on 5 May 1941 references the same data. The integration of the Chain Home network has produced measurable improvements in early warning capability. Radar stations now function as components of a unified detection grid. Operator reliability high, technical errors minimal. He concludes with a line typical of mid-war administrative tone. Further improvement contingent on maintenance of discipline and vigilance. As the war progressed, the logbook reflects the strain of continuous operation. Entries from late 1941 and 1942 show maintenance interruptions, equipment fatigue, and staff transfers. On 10 November 1941, transmitter output low. Engineer reports overheating in oscillator valve. Operation limited to 80% capacity. Maintenance crew dispatched. And on 12 November 1941, valve replaced. Output normal. No loss of coverage. These mechanical remarks, repeated weekly, testify to the labor of sustaining an unbroken watch. The precision of early radar depended less on machinery than on endurance, the willingness of operators to maintain calibration through fatigue and repetition. A later section of the logbook, dated February 1942, provides a fuller view of operational coordination. The entry for 30 February reads, 8:15 HRs. Network test number 4. Stations Bawdsey, Dunkirk. Ventnor participating. Synchronization successful. Average time delay between detections 3.8 seconds. Cross-verification accurate within 5 miles. Data transmitted to Fighter Command HQ. And at 09 Ourikers. All stations report readiness. System performing within expected parameters. This was no longer a localized experiment, but a continent-scale instrument. In addition to the routine logs, the Air Ministry circulated monthly evaluations under the heading Early Warning Performance Reports. The report for March 1942 contains quantitative data corroborating the Bawdsey entries. Average alert time prior to enemy approach, 14.6 minutes. Interception success rate, 82%. Station reliability, 93%. Operator error frequency 1 in 600 readings. These statistics, compiled without commentary, confirm that radar had become a mature weapon of information. Personal correspondence from this period retains the same factual tone. In a letter from Flight Lieutenant H.G. James, technical officer at Bawdsey, to the Signals Directorate on 6 April 1942, he writes, Chain home equipment functioning normally. Operators fully conversant with synchronization procedures. Recommend installation of additional standby generator to ensure continuity during power failure. The reply, signed A.W. Clark, Air Ministry Signals Division, read, Approved. Generator requisition authorized under Order 14242. The exchange demonstrates how routine the once experimental process had become. Each component of the system was now subject to maintenance requisition and audit like any other part of military supply. By 1943, the entries begin to record the transition from defensive to offensive radar use. The logbook's tone remains neutral, but the context shifts. On 10 April 1943, Bawdsey notes, 0940 HRs, test with Mobile Ground Controlled Interception Unit GCI, crossplot successful, data transmission to airborne units verified. The coordination of radar with airborne radar systems marks the technological culmination of the chain home era. Early warning had evolved into real-time guidance. An excerpt from Air Ministry Operational Bulletin, number 12243, mirrors this shift. Ground radar now integrated with air interception systems. Early warning stations to continue long-range detection supplementing GCI units. Network integrity to be maintained. The bureaucratic tone remains consistent. There is no sense of triumph or emotion, only continuation. A small note in the Bawdsey log for 6th June 1904 reflects the station's indirect participation in Operation Overlord. 015 HRs, heavy radio traffic west sector, multiple friendly formations, range 70-100 miles, coastal radar operating full capacity, no interference. That entry, though, brief, situates the station within one of the most complex radar operations in history. Yet even here, the language remains factual, procedural, and without sentiment. The last major wartime annotation appears on 8 May 1945. No hostile contacts, normal operations, station released from alert. At the bottom of the page, in faint handwriting, end of watch. These 4 words close nearly 6 years of continuous recording. They appear without signature or ceremony, consistent with the discipline that defined the record from its beginning. In retrospect, the middle and late sections of the Bawdsey logbook demonstrate a progression from uncertainty to routine. The data shifts from sporadic observation to systematic measurement. The language from description to codified procedure. Every page marks refinement. There is no narrative voice, only the continuity of observation. What began as an experiment in seeing the unseen had become a permanent system of vigilance. Through these pages, the process of normalization is visible in detail, a transition documented not through analysis, but through repetition. Each bearing range and time mark stands as evidence of order replacing uncertainty. The logbook does not interpret events, it verifies them. Its calm precision conveys the culmination of a technological discipline that transformed war itself into a sequence of measurable signals. The final pages of the Station CH-201 logbook span from March to May 1945. The handwriting, though neat, has become faint with age. The lines narrow and the spacing between entries increases as if the rhythm of observation itself were slowing down. The ink changes from blue-black to gray pencil. The pages are thinner, showing through with impressions from earlier sheets. The content no longer reflects the intensity of 1940 to 1943. Instead, the remarks are brief maintenance checks, weather notes, and operational confirmations that no longer anticipate threat, but verify routine. The entry dated 3 March 1945 reads, "Routine watch, equipment serviceable, test signal steady, no unidentified contacts." The following day, a similar line, "Station operating as scheduled. Range tests consistent. Coastal network functioning." Each sentence seems to echo the previous one, as though the purpose of the log has narrowed to continuity alone. On 16 March 1945, a slightly longer annotation appears. "Report from Group Control. Enemy air activity diminishing. Continue normal readiness. Record only verified contacts." After that date, there are long stretches with only 2 or 3 entries per page. The record for 24 April 1945 provides the last operational report of the war period. Contact 07040, range 78 miles. Bearing constant for 3 minutes. Identified friendly aircraft returning from continental operation. No other returns. The next line, written in a lighter hand, adds, "System stable. Personnel on reduced shift." The cumulative tone is neither relief nor triumph. It is procedural calm, a gradual cessation of purpose rendered through minimal words. On 5 May 1945, the entry reads, "Weather clear, no contacts, all equipment functioning, awaiting further orders." And then 1 day later to May, "Signal line open, no traffic, routine maintenance. The pen pressure is weak, the handwriting uneven." The next date, 7 May 1945, bears only a single sentence, "Operation suspended 2300 HRs." Beneath it, faintly penciled another hand, add, "Await confirmation of surrender." There are no additional details. The rest of the page is blank. Turning to the final leaf, the last dated entry appears under 8 May 1945. "No hostile contacts, normal operations. Station released from alert." The line below, written smaller, as if the author wished not to intrude on the text above, reads, "Operator off watch." That is the last entry. The remainder of the page is unlined, unused. The following pages are empty except for 2 notes written later in red pencil by an archivist, end of volume, and transferred to Air Ministry, 1946. No summary, no reflection, no acknowledgement of victory. The logbook simply stops recording. There is evidence that a continuation volume once existed. A reference slip inserted between the back cover and the binding notes, see Station CH-201, Volume 2. Post-war, May 1945, Deck 1946. But that second volume has not survived. Its location is unknown. The catalog of the Air Defense Museum lists it as "missing, presumed destroyed." The finality of the surviving book is therefore literal. The record ends precisely where the war ends. The cessation of entries is not symbolic. It is procedural. When there was nothing left to report, the writing ceased. The same pattern appears across other chain home logs preserved from the same week. Ventnor's final line, dated 8 May 1945, read, "No signals. Stand down." Dunkirk's last entry, radar silent. Orders to power down, received 2,000 HRs. Tremmingham's record concludes, "Equipment secured. Personnel to return to peacetime duties." All of them converge on silence, not the silence of destruction, but of completion. In the Bawdsey volume, the very last marks on paper indentations visible under light suggest that someone pressed the nib of a pen into the page without writing, perhaps testing whether the ink had run dry. The act leaves no word, only pressure. This moment, invisible to those who wrote it, defines the end of the archival sound. For 6 years, the station had transmitted, received, and recorded signals from an unseen sky. Now the machinery stood still, its operators awaiting reassignment. The watch had ended, but the record remained. From an archival standpoint, this is the point of highest tension. Nothing in the document changes tone or content. The climax resides entirely in the absence of continuation. After thousands of lines detailing bearings and ranges, the absence of a next line becomes the most meaningful entry of all. In a memorandum attached to the back cover, written by Wing Commander A.T. Merton, during the post-war inspection in July 1945, one short paragraph acknowledges the station's closure. Bawdsey CH site deactivated. Equipment to be dismantled. All records to be forwarded to Air Ministry Technical Branch. Personnel reallocated. There is no signature, no date beyond the month, and no commentary. When this memorandum was filed, the logbook's role was complete. The recording of signals, the mechanical translation of invisible echoes into ink, had ended. The final notation, operator off watch, captures not only the end of a shift, but the termination of a system's living function. Reading the last pages the reader encounters, stillness, line after line of blank paper, the quiet echo of procedure discontinued. The earlier rhythm hour, bearing range, stops abruptly, replaced by white space. The effect is not absence of data, but presence of silence. No conclusion follows. No retrospective evaluation. The logbook, faithful to its purpose, could not summarize what it had witnessed. Its task was to record phenomena, not to interpret them. When there were no more phenomena, there was nothing left to record. In the physical artifact, even the texture of the final pages differs. The paper is rougher, as if drawn from a different batch. The ink fades at the corners, merging with dust. Conservation reports note that the last sheet bears minute salt crystals, possibly from the sea air that entered through the hut's open window during those final days. They shimmer faintly under magnification, microscopic residue from the same wind that once carried the radio waves the operators traced. The final line, operator off watch, has been quoted in several historical studies, often as a metaphor. Yet in the archival context, it remains literal, an entry required by protocol when a watch ended. The emotional resonance belongs to the reader, not the record. No signature follows. The pen stops, the page ends. Silence. For the first time since 1939, the airwaves over the eastern coast of England were unmonitored. The oscilloscopes went dark. The antennas ceased rotation. But within the pages of this logbook, the signal persists in another form, numerical, procedural, factual. The book closes without summary. No one added an epilogue. There is only the institutional seal impressed on the inside cover, Air Ministry property. And below it, stamped faintly, one last notation, received 14 June 1945. After that, nothing. No echo, no reply, no continuation. The system that once turned invisible echoes into warnings, left behind only the paper that contained them. The final entry stands alone, intact, definitive, its power derived not from what it says, but from where it stops. The silence that follows is the document's own conclusion. Today, the station CH-201 logbook survives as one of the most complete wartime records of early radar operations in Britain. It was first rediscovered in 1975 by a curator from the Imperial War Museum during an audit of unlisted equipment files at the decommissioned Bawdsey Research Establishment. The logbook was found in a steel cabinet marked Obsolete Equipment Records, alongside vacuum tube schematics and calibration charts. Its spine bore no title, only a faded stencil, CH-201, 1939 to 1940. The curator, identified in subsequent reports as A.L. Peterson, documented its condition in a short accession note. Ledger volume, blue cloth cover, approximately 300 pages. Entries by multiple hands, 1939 to 1945. Ink fading, otherwise legible. The logbook was transferred first to the Imperial War Museum's Air Defense Collection, then in 1979 to to the Royal Air Force Air Defense Radar Museum at Neatishead, where it remains catalogued under item number RAF AID-CH 201-3945. The process of verification and preservation took several years. The National Archives confirmed the handwriting through comparison with personnel rosters and wartime duty schedules. The paper stock matched that issued by the Air Ministry for classified communications logs in 1939, and the fountain pen ink corresponded chemically to the standard Stevens Blue-Black number 52, used widely across RAF stations. These forensic confirmations established the document's authenticity beyond doubt. During conservation in 1983, minor restoration was performed, detached pages were rehinged, the spine reinforced, and acidic tape removed. The binding was stabilized under neutral pH treatment. Each page was microfilmed and later digitized for reference copies. The microfilm sequence produced by the Defense Evaluation and Research Agency DERA was indexed as BODSI CH Log 1939-45, microcopy 1783. Digital scans became available to researchers in 2005 through the National Archives Digital Collection. Each scan retains the original marginalia underlinings and ink irregularities. The transcription layer created for accessibility follows the text exactly, preserving abbreviations such as RF off Echo Nil and OP off Watch. As of the latest archival review, the original logbook remains housed in a temperature and humidity-controlled vault at Neatishead. Public access is limited to digital surrogates. Physical handling is restricted to conservation staff. The pages are considered too fragile for regular display. A high-resolution facsimile copy is used for exhibitions, most recently featured in the museum's 2021 installation, From Echo to Screen, The First Watchers. Several questions, however, remain unresolved. The identity of the last operator, the hand that wrote Operator Off Watch on 8th of May 1945, has not been confirmed. Personnel rosters list two possible candidates: Corporal Ernest M. Carter and Sergeant Harold W. Fourie, Reed, both assigned to night duty during the final week of the war. The handwriting comparison is inconclusive. Both used similar cursive forms and identical abbreviations. The final page bears no signature, and no supplementary duty report has survived to clarify the assignment. Another uncertainty concerns the missing continuation volume, Station CH-201, Logbook Volna 2, post-war, May 1945 to Dis 1946. Archival correspondence from 1948 mentions its existence, but its location after transfer to the Air Ministry Technical Branch is unknown. It is presumed lost, possibly discarded, during administrative downsizing in the early 1950s. Without that volume, the transition from wartime to post-war radar operations remains only partially documented. Despite these absences, the surviving logbook has become a cornerstone of radar historiography. Scholars studying early warning systems rely on it to trace the operational rhythm of the chain-home network. Its pages supply data for reconstruction models that chart the daily coverage arcs of Britain's East Coast during the Battle of Britain and the V1 and V2 campaign periods. The clarity of its entries allows historians to compare radar performance with contemporary fighter command. Intercept reports bridging gaps between instrument and outcome. The logbook also stands as a testament to the anonymity of collective labor. No author claimed ownership, no forward or closing reflection was ever written. The document functions as an institutional voice, an archive of repetition, procedure, and observation. Its neutrality grants it reliability, yet that same neutrality erases the identities of those who produced it. The human presence remains only in pen pressure, uneven spacing, and the occasional note of fatigue embedded within the lines. In archival studies, such documents are classified as continuous administrative records, texts created not for communication, but for function. They preserve action rather than narrative. The BODSI logbook exemplifies this category, embodying how modern warfare produced its own archives in real time. Each entry marks the conversion of perception into data, of signal into record. Subsequent oral histories collected from surviving radar operators confirm the procedural authenticity of the language used. Interview transcripts from the RAF Chain Home Veterans Project 1987 to 1991 includes statements from several men who served at Bawdsey, Ventnor, and Dunkirk. Their recollections align closely with the phrasing of the logbook entries. One veteran, identified as Flight Sergeant David L. Barnes, described the habit of closing each watch with the phrase, "Operator off watch." He explained, "That was the last thing you wrote before turning the chair over to the next man." We never thought anyone would read it after us. In that remark, the everyday gesture becomes an unintended memorial. The continued preservation of the station CH-201 logbook ensures that the operational history of Britain's early radar defense remains traceable in its original form. Every figure, coordinate, and bearing entered by hand in the dim light of the receiver hut now exists as digital data accessible to researchers worldwide. The technology that once recorded invisible echoes has itself become an artifact of observation. As of the 2020s, the document remains under dual custodianship, the physical ledger held at Neatishead and the digital master copy archived by the National Archives under reference AIR 34-1527. Conservation assessments classify its condition as stable. Occasional microfading in ink is mitigated through controlled lighting and digitization redundancy. The silence following its final line "Operator off watch" continues to resonate through its archival afterlife. Every subsequent reproduction, citation, and study extends that silence into new forms of interpretation. The data once intended for immediate command decisions now functions as a historical signal, transmitted across decades, reinterpreted by scholars, curators, and listeners who encounter it without the urgency that created it. The last page therefore stands both as conclusion and continuation. The operators ceased writing, but their process of attention, systematic, patient, unembellished, remains visible in the ledger's persistence. What ended as procedure survives as testimony. The chain home network was dismantled, its towers removed, its frequencies reassigned, but the pages that measured its pulse endure. They record not the drama of battle, but the cadence of vigilance, the measured intervals by which a nation learned to see through distance. In the quiet presence of that ledger, one perceives not a story of triumph or loss, but of endurance, the endurance of method of observation and of record-keeping itself. History often celebrates invention, yet the continuity of attention, the daily act of watching, is what allows invention to matter. The station CH-201 logbook holds that continuity intact. And so, as the final archival note reads, stamped in red ink on the back page, preserved by order of the Air Ministry for permanent record, it remains there still. In the silence of its closing page, the trace of vigilance endures unchanged, exact, and waiting to be heard once more. Before you close this file, take a moment to imagine the sound that followed its last words. The hum of a generator winding down, the faint echo of sea wind against empty towers, and the slow disappearance of a signal that once filled the air. What we hear now is not the radar's pulse, but the quiet continuity of those who wrote it across paper, across time. History ends where the ink dries, but its echoes remain. Continue listening.